This is StoryBeat, Storytellers on Storytelling, an exploration into how master storytellers and artists develop and build brilliant stories and works of art that people everywhere love and admire. So join us as we discover how talented creators of all kinds find success in the worlds of imagination and entertainment. Here now is your host, Steve Cuden.
Thanks for joining us on StoryBeat. We're coming to you from the Steel City, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. StoryBeat episodes are widely available on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and numerous other podcast apps and platforms. So please take a moment to join the StoryBeat family wherever you listen to podcasts. My guest today, Byron Werner, is a director of photography based in Los Angeles. At the age of 16, he began his career working in the Sega studios, creating live-action video games. While earning a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Film and Television from Chapman University, Byron shot his first feature film, the first of over 30. He did not follow the usual path of climbing up through the ranks to become a DP. Rather, he shot anything and everything he could as a DP, using experience to further his education. In addition to feature films, Byron has shot over 100 short films, countless music videos for major artists, and commercials for many top-named brands. Byron's most notable film, Phantom, for one of our favorite StoryBeat guests, director Todd Robinson, starring Ed Harris and David Duchovny, hit theaters March 1st, 2013, on over 2,000 screens. Todd's next movie, The Last Full Measure, starring Samuel L. Jackson, William Hurt, Christopher Plummer, Diane Ladd, Ed Harris, Sebastian Stan, Peter Fonda, and many more notables, was released in theaters early in 2020 prior to the COVID pandemic hitting and is now available on Netflix and elsewhere. Byron was also the DP on that movie. I can tell you it's a truly powerful film about war heroism and its lasting impact on those involved in battle and at home. I highly urge you to check it out. Byron also shot the TV show feature film hybrid Culture Shock for Blumhouse Television as part of the Into the Dark series on Hulu. Byron recently shot Spinning Gold, also starring Samuel L. Jackson, Jason Isaacs, Michelle Monaghan, Jay Farrow, Jason Derulo, Dan Fogler, Jeremy Jordan, and Caitlin Fitzgerald. And in the interest of full disclosure, Byron Werner was the cinematographer of a crazy little award-winning movie I happened to direct and co-produce in 2001 called Lucky, which, hard to believe, is still available on Netflix on DVD. And so it is a great joy and a real privilege for me to welcome the exceptionally talented Byron Werner to StoryBeat. Byron, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to catching up after all this time.
I know we haven't talked for quite some time, and you've had quite a bit of career in between the times we were together. So let's go all the way back to the beginning, which is where I like to start. Where did your love of moving images come from? When did you first realize, probably as a little boy, that moving images were something to pay attention to?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't somebody who watched a ton of movies and became a cinephile that way. I think I was like a high 8 camera or something when I was I don't know, maybe 7th grade or something like that. And so I started playing with that and just started to tell stories, make short movies and little things like that with my siblings. So, but funny enough, it all kind of came from a nun who was the head of my Catholic school, like when I was in 7th grade, who told a bunch of us to go, make movies or TV shows or be creative. They had a little closed circuit television. So that kind of sparked it all. And, then from there, I kind of fell in love with telling stories and just, mostly behind the camera. So I kind of thought I wanted to be a director, but then I went to college and figured out that, the cinematographer is, I like to hold the camera and tell the story that way.
So, all right. What was it when you got to college that was about the camera that really drew you in? Was it the fact that it was behind the scenes, or was it the fact that you were shaping imagery? What was it?
Well, I mean, mostly it was really simple. It was the fact that I took a cinematography class and I thought that, this is exactly what I want to do. And today kids, young people have so many resources, and I'm sure I had some, but not to the extent that you have now. So I kind of thought that the director was, there was one person that held the camera and told the story that way and told the actors what to do. I didn't really know how it broke down. I never got into it that carefully. So once I went to school and realized, how the division of labor worked, I was like, okay, this is what I'd rather do.
So you figured out very early on, because obviously at 16, you were already starting to work at Sega. How'd you get that gig?
So my dad used to work for Sega. He was like a senior vice president. And so he got me an internship working in their Sega studio. And then I did a good job, I think over the summer or whatever. And then they let me stay on. So I was able to work on the Jurassic Park game at that time and the Joe Montana football game. And, there was a guy there that kind of taught me how to shoot a little more professionally. We had a little blue screen studio and we had high 8 cameras. I can't even imagine keying in high 8. And then my job was to work. My first job was on Jurassic Park. They had shot a bunch of footage down in Florida and it was really shaky. So my job at that time was to go into Macromedia Director, where you could go in, I would zoom in, and then my job was to go frame by frame and steady all the footage.
Really?
So, yeah, and then they let me do more stuff in Photoshop and play around with things. But to be honest, I didn't know anything. That was a fun experience, learning a little bit, but if I was doing it today, it would be a whole different ball game. I can't even imagine having all the tools and knowledge that people have today.
Well, of course. And we'll talk about Lucky as we're going forward, but Lucky was one of the first all digital feature films anybody had ever made. You remember that?
Yeah. That's the only good thing about starting when I started is, almost everything you shot was on film, whether it was short films or feature films. So then, when Lucky started, it was very little digital production going on. Did we shoot on a Varicam at like 720? Is that right?
No, we shot on a Panasonic camera that was 720p.
Yeah. So that was it was the Panasonic Varicam. Yeah.
It was a Varicam. Okay.
Yeah. I think that's what they were called. Yeah. They're still called that. I think that's what they were called then. But, that was a cool little camera. I think it shot on tape, and it
shot on little digital tapes.
Yeah.
And if I remember correctly, it was a true 60 frame camera, and that we had to down convert to NTSC. So we're going way geeky over most of the audience's head at this moment. So I don't want to get too deep in the weeds on the tech.
Of course not.
But in any event, we were way ahead of the curve, and maybe in a way, maybe we were a little too far ahead of the curve. It would have been better to have been a few years later when it was a little more worked out. But we were learning. You were learning on that.
I was just going to say the great thing about it is because of your vision of doing a lot of long takes and following from one room all the way outside down into the other one and around, that shooting digital was a godsend. Because if we did on film, we never would have been able to afford it.
So for sure,
it actually worked out to be a great tool for us on that movie. Probably better than film.
Well, the opening shot of the movie, for those who've never seen Lucky, and I rarely encourage people to see it, but yeah, you should check it out because it's very interesting. If you like dark movies, this is very dark in more ways than one. It's visually dark and its storytelling is dark. All of it's dark. But the opening shot of the movie is a very long take. It starts on the outside of a house, goes in and sweeps all the way through the house, sweeps back outside and back into the basement of the house, and sweeps all the way into a computer monitor. And that's where we start the movie. And that Byron on that movie was, as I've referred to him many times to many different people, a human Steadicam, because he just took the camera and hand held it. And it was, you could tell it wasn't a perfect Steadicam, but it was darn close to it for being a handheld camera. All right. So I'm curious, what was it about the camera itself when you first started working with it that drew you in? Was it the technical elements? Was it the lighting? What was it that fascinated you the most about it that said, yeah, this is for me?
Lighting was definitely part of it. I enjoyed that process and the idea that you could put gels on and change colors and put lights in different spots to get different results. We studied a lot of, I started out doing some black and white and, big shadows and, doing some noir type stuff, which was really fun. But I think overall it was like my first experience was like, loading a Bolex camera and touching film and the mechanics of it. And the fact that it was such a new thing when I was used to using video cameras. I feel like the film really captured me. What you could, the whole process, I love the process of filmmaking, and we still have a great process of filmmaking, even digitally, but the whole process of filmmaking and the idea of it is really the perfect example is film. Is like you load film, you shoot film, you expose film, you take it to a lab, you wait for the results, then you telecine or transfer it, and then you edit it. So just that whole process, I love that. And I think that all aspects of filmmaking have still have a step-by-step process that I really enjoy, but that was really the beginning of it.
You don't ever shoot on film anymore, do you?
I don't. The last time I shot on film was probably 8 or 9 years ago. I mean, I think I've shot a little bit of like, okay, grab a Bolex or a Super 8 or grab pieces of it. But no, it's all digital now. And I got to be honest, I know there's a lot of people that, love film and are so nostalgic for it. And I have nothing against it. I love film too, but I shoot with the Arri Alexa a lot. I love digital cameras and I love the instant result. I love not having to wait with the lab to find out if something was scratched or there was a problem to reshoot. So I'm a big proponent, a big fan of it. And I miss film a little bit, but not enough to, try to push somebody to shoot it when I think it's going to hurt the movie because it's too expensive or, for any of my own real purposes or.
Well, I was sold on video when we did Lucky. I thought that is the wave and it is where it's gone. Do you think that it was helpful? You're probably among a group of the last generation of cinematographers who will be trained on film. You have some film training, obviously. Do you think that that's a huge advantage for you over those that are coming up now and only are working on video?
I don't know if it's a huge advantage, but I mean, I think it's an advantage. It's an advantage if you have to shoot film, but it's also, I mean, it does help, I think, to understand the process, to understand how film worked. But, mostly too, I feel very comfortable grabbing a light meter and, as much as I like having a DIT and have somebody control the image, if I'm on a smaller movie or I'm in a situation where I can't and we're doing Steadicam outside and it's the end of the day and I have to get a bunch of shots and I can't even look at the monitor, I'm comfortable putting up a meter and figuring it out. So I think it definitely helps in that sense to have some confidence. And, the last full measure, for example, we didn't have a DIT. I just had a downloader. So a lot of, what I did was kind of shoot it like film, put it in a place where I knew that I was going to have enough latitude later on to make the images exactly how I wanted it to be. But I didn't sit on set and become seriously picky about it and color correct every little thing or nitpick. I just didn't have the time.
So as we don't want to lose the uninitiated, what's a DIT?
So that's a digital imaging technician. That is a person on set who their job is to manage the image, to make sure that they have a lot of jobs. It depends on, if it's a small movie, they may be downloading, and then they're also checking the image, checking the cards, all that kind of stuff. But, on a bigger movie, a DIT is somebody who really helps you set some looks, some LUTs, which are lookup tables, which will allow you to shoot and log so that you have the most room later to color correct, but then see, what the image you want on set. So basically, the long and short of it is they're really an on-set color correction person who can make sure everybody's seeing the image the way you want them to right from the beginning.
So one of the major jobs that you have as a cinematographer is to figure out the way it all looks and comes together as a piece. So you could be shooting in many different situations in which the lighting is so different that you put the two pieces of film together or digital images together and they don't look like they belong in the same place. So your job, part of it is to make sure everything looks like it belongs together, correct?
Correct.
And so one of the things that you have to work with is not only the technology, but the lighting and the set and the costumes and whatever else is there. So what is it that you do when you get to a set or a location, wherever you are, whether you're indoors or outdoors? What is the first thing that you look for when you're there? What are you trying to figure out?
Well, when I'm tech scouting, oftentimes if it's on a sound stage, then the first thing I start, I look at the plans on how the production designer is building it, and I think about practical lights, and I think about places that I'm gonna put lights and windows, and try to help them, try to design that together to make it work for what the director and I want to shoot. But if it's at a location, I mean, the first thing that I do absolutely is look at the sun, figure out where the sun's going to be, figure out if I need to use it, if I need to block it. If it's outside, absolutely.
What do you mean by use it or block it? What does that mean?
Well, if I'm inside, then I have choices. I can use the sun, direct sun if I need it. I mean, there are times, depends on the size of the production, but there are times where you need a big light and you don't have a big enough light. So you just time it around the sun to come through the windows and you can get those couple shots you need. or sometimes it's better off just to put up a black flag or to shoot when the sun is on the other side of the building, so that then you can use something outside that bounces the light back in. So, I need to know where the light is so that I can match the image, like you said, the best possible way, because the worst thing you can do is have an image that doesn't it doesn't cut together. That's my job, is to make sure it does.
Yeah, because you want the film to be apparently seamless, and that's part of the editor's job. But the image has to be there in the first place for the editor to put it together and make it seamless. So if you had a white room and in one shot it was white and in the next room it looked blue, that wouldn't be so good, would it?
No, that would be bad. And that's, yes, you have to be, that doesn't happen to me, but that could. I mean, for a novice filmmaker starting out, something like that can happen if you're messing with the color temperature, or, you could be shooting something where there's a window on the opposite side and the warm sunlight at the end of the day is bouncing off a white wall inside and creating a warm hue, and you don't finish your scene and the sun goes down and all of a sudden everything gets much cooler. And if you don't know how to rebalance it, then or put a light up or change it, then you've got a big problem. So yes, I mean, it's a simplification of what I do, but I definitely have to be, conscious of all those things.
Sure. Well, I like to say, so, for years I was a lighting designer in the theater. And one of the things I like to say about it, and you're in the same boat in a way, is that you have to do your job as a DP, you have to be both a technically proficient person and an artist at the same time. You've got the both sides that you have to have. You can't be lacking in technical proficiency or in the artistry of it.
Correct.
Let's go back to the beginning of the process. So somebody comes to you, whether it's a producer or a director or whoever it is, and comes to you and says, "Hey, Byron, we've got this project and we would like you to be our cinematographer on it." And there may be something prior to that. It may be that you're submitting resume or whatever you're doing. But nevertheless, at some point, somebody hires you. What's the first thing you do? Is it the reading of the script? Is it talking to the director? What is your first stop usually?
Well, I mean, it's a two-step process. The first step definitely is to read the script, 100%. I mean, I rarely will take a meeting if I haven't read the script. I've been asked to take meetings before, like, "Oh, the script's not ready." I can't go meet without reading the script. I have to know what it's about to have an intelligent conversation. But then the first thing that I do is, even before I meet with the directors, I put together a lookbook. Now, whether I show that director in the interview, if I'm already hired, I definitely show it to them. If I'm interviewing,
what's a lookbook?
So a lookbook is, I use Keynote. You can use any, format you want, but it's basically a book of pictures and images that you feel represent either the movie or certain scenes. I do it both with lighting. Actually, I do it a lot of different things. I'll do it with lighting, and I'll break it down sometimes if there's, if maybe it's exterior, maybe it's interior, maybe there's periods in the movie, I'll break it down. But then I also like to do camera frames framing that I like, whether, something has a lot of foreground, or maybe there's a lot of smoke, or maybe there's a lot of silhouetting against a window, which could be lighting and camera. So I put together a book.
It's a lot of it's style. You're expressing style and the way it looks and tone.
Yeah, it's all style, because I don't really deal with the actors in terms of their performance. Now, sometimes I may have an idea, or like, wow, in this scene, I really feel like it would be amazing if they were framed this way, and if they were sitting right across from each other, and there was a window there. So sometimes I may overstep, or it's not overstepping, but really kind of get into the director's world a teeny bit by saying, if we staged it this way, it would be great. But overall, yes, it's really about the lighting and the camera and the visuals, because what I want to do is I want them to understand what I'm thinking, and they can tell me if I'm off base or not. Generally, I'm pretty, I'm pretty much on, because when you read the script, I think oftentimes
it speaks to you.
Pretty obvious. Yeah, it speaks to you. And I think if you're going to get the job, then you're going to be in line with the director. So even if you're off, then you're not meant to get the job. Or they may correct you and say, "I really like what you do, but no, I'd rather do it this way." And you say, "Oh yeah, you know what? I'm going to go home and I'm going to make these adjustments for this, this, and this," because they may say something you haven't thought of. But overall, I feel like I'm, either right on or usually in the ballpark.
Okay, so you've presented the director and or the producer, whoever it is you're presenting, the director usually, with your lookbook. Okay, where do you go from there? You've read the script, you know what the story's about, you've decided you want to work with these people, and vice versa, they want to work with you. You've shown them what you want to do. What's the next step?
Well, if I'm hired, then I start prep, and my next big thing is to figure out, are we shooting on location? Are we shooting in a stage? If we're shooting on a stage, what are we building? Then talk to the production designer, and oftentimes in my lookbook, once I've got the job, I will then even start adding in like, oh, I think these practical lights would look great, and I think this, this if this fluorescent, this could really be neat, and this kind of sconce on the wall. So I'll start adding those in. And then there's something that I do that I'm sure not everybody does, but I like to do. I've started the last couple of movies. I start creating what's called I call a visual Bible. So I just take a page, I put the scene number on it, and I start just laying out a page for each one. And then I just start putting my notes on there. So I'll start taking some of the pictures from my lookbook, transferring them to that page. And then when I go on location scouts, I'll start taking those pictures and transferring that page. And I just basically start building like a digital notebook. And then, I share it with whomever is interested. And usually it's for me, but it's also so that I can, once I, hire a gaffer and a Steadicam operator or whomever and a key grip, I can communicate the vision to them. And the other big thing that for me is I feel like a director has a lot to do. So one of the big things that I try to do right away is get in their head and write down everything that they tell me. So A, they don't have to tell me twice. And B, if I'm having a conversation with the production designer and they're like, oh, well, I wonder what the director's thinking here. I'm like, oh no, we already had that discussion. Here's my notes. Here's what we're thinking. So I try to be an advocate to give the director more time to do what they need to do, because if they have to explain themselves 5, 6, 7 times, it gets tiring. They have casting, they have things to do. So I try to get in their head enough to be able to articulate for them when necessary, when they're busy, to other crew members, what the shared vision is.
You're not saying directing is a hard job, are you?
I think it's an incredibly hard job. I have a lot of respect for directors, and
it's a really hard job because all roads lead through you ultimately. You're making the decisions nonstop. It's a nonstop array of people coming at you at all times. All right. So when do you start to prepare a shot list? Is that part of this process?
Well, yes and no. First of all, to me, it's important to.
And what is a shot list, by the way?
Yeah. Well, shot list is basically your list of shots that you would like to get on the day. Mm-hmm. So the answer is, it's a very complicated answer. It depends on the director. There's certain directors that will shot list themselves and then come to you. There's other ones that want you to do it with them. I've been in situations where, they're very busy, and I'll shot list some stuff and then send it to them, and they'll be like, yeah, I like this. Let's change this, this, and this. There's also something called like a beat sheet. So sometimes I'll even do a beat sheet for action scenes, so that if the director and I are working with a storyboard artist, that we know all the beats and everything we want to cover. And sometimes the directors will do that, but other times if I do it beforehand and show it to them, I save a lot of time. So to me, it's, okay, let's figure out what we want to storyboard. Let's figure out what we're going to shot list, and let's figure out if the director likes to shot list, because some directors also, I use something called Shot Designer, and I'll do overhead plots. So sometimes, I'll go into a location, and I usually like to either have a set or the location before we do it. There's certain situations where you could just do it. It's not a big deal. But once you've walked through it with them, either they or I will sketch down on a piece of paper, okay, let's have the character here, that they're going to walk to here, and I'm going to have camera A here, B here, and then we'll just do an overhead diagram. We can just do a really simple rudimentary one, and then I'll take it into Shot Designer, and there I can kind of create a shot list / overhead plots. Mm-hmm. So, it like I said, it depends. The director will do it. I'll do it. We'll do it together. It can happen any number of ways. There's no right or wrong way to do it.
Right. Sure. There's everything under the sun. You may or may not recall, going back to Lucky, that I had spent a long time sort of very roughly storyboarding the whole show. Storyboards being, for those who don't know, you're actually drawing out both the way the scene looks, where the camera will likely be, and whether there's movement to the camera and so on, or the actors are moving, whatever's moving. You're trying to indicate that too. But that I had done that, and then you and I sat down and we together did a shot list. And that took a little while to get through, because we did. Yeah. Lucky, because I don't want to harp on it too much, but Lucky, we shot it very fast. We shot it in 9.5 days, and we did over 420 setups in 9.5 days. So you can calculate that. And we never went over 12 hours on a single day. So you figure that out. It's about a shot every 15 minutes. So you had to be very,
Crazy.
very, very prepared. And
Yes.
and then the movie, which is only 83 minutes long, has over 2,000 edits in it, over 2,000
Crazy.
cuts. So it was put together in a very unusual way. It took a long time to do. It took a short time to shoot it and a long time to finish it. But going back to what I was saying is that you and I worked on the shot list together. And then the shot list is an indication of what you really want. Do you work with directors who are adamant that you stick to that shot list, or do most directors realize that sometimes you get to a set and you have to punt, you have to go a different direction?
I think most of them realize. I've worked with one director who storyboarded everything on his own, and he pretty much knew exactly how he wanted to cut the movie, exactly how he wanted it shot, and we stuck to it for the most part. I mean, he would make adjustments if he had to, but he would also let me do the lighting, anything I wanted to, pretty much. Like, he had an opinion when he saw it, but his preparation didn't involve lighting. It involved talking about images, but it involved the camera mostly. But most directors, I find, put together a shot list and are obviously able to adjust. And I think that, I'm not working on movies with unlimited budgets. If you're working on a Marvel movie where you put everything together beforehand, then that's great and you can shoot every shot. But most of the movies that I work on, no matter how big they are, whether it's 2 million or 20 million, you still run out of time in the day. You still have actors that are leaving. You still get into a position where you have to choose shots, and you have a shot list, and that's a great guide, but you have to prioritize that shot list too, because at the end of the day, you may be cutting 4 shots, but you better hope you're cutting the right 4 shots.
Right, sure. Well, I always think of it as you're preparing and preparing and preparing, and making a movie is all about preparation prior to getting to the set. I mean, if you're not prepared, certainly if the DP's not prepared, if the director's not prepared, I think you have a big problem, because logistically it's going to be a mess probably. But without, I always think of preparation as you're preparing to punt. It's like a football team. You're going downfield. You expect to move the ball 10 yards, 10 yards, 10 yards, whatever. But sometimes you don't get to do that. Now you have to punt. Well, that's what doing all that prep is for. So you can punt.
But it's also nice that the quarterback has, and the offensive coordinator or the coach has that list of all their plays, which is basically like your shot list, and you want to choose the right plays before you have to punt. And every day you have to punt. Sometimes you have to give stuff up. Sometimes you have to punt it to the next day. So I agree. I think that preparation is one of the cheapest things you can do in the movies. It's one of the most important things you can do. And I'm not sure you can make a good movie, or it doesn't happen very often, without prepping. Now, you can prep and not make a good movie, but I just think if you prep, you've got such a better fighting chance to make a good movie. And there's always so many obstacles. You need to give yourself as much as much as you can to try to, put yourself in a position to succeed as best possible. And preparation really is the way.
Because you can't prepare your way out of some kind of situation, like you're supposed to have a sunny day and it's raining. I mean, you can't prepare your way out of that, except to say, here's how we're gonna pivot on a day like that. We're gonna pivot to something else. So that is preparation, but you can't change the way things are sometimes. And so you have to,
and you never have enough time or enough money either. So I mean, that's the thing, is it doesn't matter how big the movie is, you always run out. It's
I was going to say, I think you could talk to all the Marvel guys and Spielberg and all those folks all day long, and they'll all tell you they don't have enough time, no matter how much money they have.
Yeah, I always say on music videos, it's like, if you have $10,000, it's $100,000 concept. If you have $100,000, $1 million concept. It's like it's always hard. So, and you're always trying to do more, and movies aren't any different.
All right. So do you find that you are constantly reinventing the wheel as you go into a new show, or do you find that you're able to use what you know from the past big time regularly?
I feel like for the most part, I use what I know from the past. I build, it's building blocks. I build off the knowledge that I have and experience, but I always learn new things. I learn from people, whether I learn from gaffers, I learn from camera operators, I learn from production designers. I mean, it's a little tough and sad these days, even pre-COVID, which now it's even harder, but that not as much as being shot in Los Angeles. So you're away from your family and all that. But the beauty is, when you travel, you don't bring a ton of people with you. So you get exposed to so many new technicians and artists that's the one big benefit that I feel like I'm always learning from people. It's amazing because, you know, I have the stuff that I like, and oftentimes it's my go-to, but I also feel like there's just never a situation where you're not going to learn something when you're doing a movie. And if there is, then you should probably quit.
Yeah, no, I think it's a constant learning process. You never know. I'm sure that the greatest directors, actors, DPs, et cetera, in the world are constantly learning, and that's the way that you grow. What is it that you get from directors that you wish they would do more of? Well, how are you helped by directors?
Well, I mean, what you just said before was it's preparation. I mean, there are directors that don't prep. There are directors that, I mean, they prep, but they really don't think it through. They either want you to do the shot list, or they kind of have an idea, or they're like, I don't know it until I'm there.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, you do get in a situation. I mean, if you're in a situation where, you have like a studio or, that situation, oftentimes I feel like somebody's asking for a shot list, or, they want to see something producers do. But there are times where some directors, it happens where they don't want a shot list. They want to figure out in the day.
Have you ever been caught flat-footed where you've walked into a situation that you really weren't prepared for?
I mean, I've definitely had that happen because things change. But yeah, I mean, it's happened. I mean,
it's part of the game.
Sometimes, yes, sometimes you don't even have a choice. Sometimes it's not because you're not prepared. You prepare the best you can, but then it does happen, quite a bit of time where there, especially if you have a novice director, where there's directors that think they want this, and they think that this is, they tell you this, and this, and then you get on set and it's completely different. They have a totally different idea, and they didn't know enough to articulate it, or they changed their mind or whatever. And then, yeah, you're caught flat-footed, and you have to, figure it out. But part of my job is thinking on my feet and figuring out how to do it. And the biggest part of my job, the hardest thing I think at times, is if you're in a situation where you have to punt or you have to change something. It could even just be because the sun changed and the clouds came out, or the sun came out, and you decide to put up a big overhead to block the sun, and then it's going to go away. The big thing is, if you have a whole crew and you tell them to march in a certain direction, the biggest thing you have to do is know when to continue. Even when things are falling apart and the AD's telling you, God, we got to go. You got to figure that, are you sure this is right? And you just have to go the course and know that your experience is going to get you there, and not backtrack and go all the way back and end up with a product that's inferior. That's the hardest thing, really. It's just stay in the course.
You can't read about experience. You have to experience. And,
Yes.
And so the more that you do, the more you gain in terms of the ability to do what you just talked about, which is to make that swivel and go in a different direction, or to say, hey, this is the time I'm moving ahead with, speed, as opposed to I'm giving up and we're going to bag it for today, or whatever that would be. So,
which I hope is never the case. I try not to give up. And I always try to make sure that whatever's on screen is going to, be, Todd Robinson talked about it in your podcast when he said John Travolta took him aside and said, this is forever. Nobody's going to know about all those other problems. And he's right. And even if it was just that he didn't know his lines, it still is a true statement that it is forever. And whatever you put up there is your name, nobody cares in the end what you went through to do it, or what the problems were, where the sun was. You just have to find a way to make it great. And you could make mistakes, but that's what being young is about. That's what doing short films is about. That's what doing, but once you get into a movie, it's like, you could make mistakes, but you really shouldn't. And I always tell people too, it's like, you can make a mistake, but don't make the same one twice. And, you got to really make sure it's not too big a one. So,
well, I learned very, very early on in my career that, you can't do it without making mistakes. You can't learn anything without making errors. So people kind of expect that you're going to do that. And there's no way to get to where you're going to go without blood, sweat, and tears. But here's the thing. The audience doesn't care what you said. The audience doesn't care what blood, sweat, and tears you've shed. They just don't care. They just care about the finished product. So you have to figure out a way to make that work.
Well, yeah. And making mistakes is, yes, it's something you can do, but that's why this business is so built on experience and about going and putting in your time and getting the chops and learning your craft. And that's why doing short films is one of the best things you can do, because you can make mistakes there. If you've got Last Full Measure with Samuel L. Jackson on set for only X amount of days, you can't really make a mistake. So, I always urge people that are starting out to, get as much experience as you can, doing those smaller things. So you can get all that out of your system. And yes, you will still make mistakes on a larger level, but by that point, there's enough people around you. I mean, I can tell you, you talk about what I do for a director sometimes and trying to help them with shot list, but I mean, I have key grips and gaffers. They whisper in my ear all day long, like, hey, the sun's going to do this or whatever. You should probably get this shot and move and do that. And they tell the AD, okay, yeah, let's do that. So that's why it's such a great collaborative experience.
Well, okay. So that's a great area that I love to talk about is collaboration. You're not in a business where you're working alone. You've never made a movie once in your life where it was just you, have you? No, there are always others, and in most cases, a lot of others. So what is it about collaboration that makes collaboration work?
The important thing about collaboration is to find people that you enjoy being around, that you have common ground with, that you get along with. I think that's the most important thing. Sometimes with directors, they interview me, but one of my tactics is to kind of interview them to see if there's somebody that I'm interested in working with, that I have common ground with. And crew people are the same thing. I like to watch their movies. I like to see what they've done. And then, the one thing that I really also do is I ask them about their family, and I ask them, I try to find a personal connection between people. Like, it could be that we watch football. It could be that we like the same movies. It could be that we just have 2 kids. It could be that we have daughters, whatever it is. So to me, collaboration is just finding people you enjoy being around. I mean, that's the main thing. Is if you're going to do a whole movie and you're not going to enjoy being around them, that's going to be really hard to be a good collaborator.
Yeah, for sure. When you're on set, you're going to be super, super busy. You're not going to be shooting the breeze a lot about, the game the night before, though it may come up a little bit. And it is better when you have some affinity for somebody and that you have something in common. Wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, it's also the same with actors. It's like, I don't have a lot in common with certain actors, but if there is something that you have in common that that you do have in common, that I've maybe done a little research before, looked at their Instagram, they're collaborators too. And to be able to, like I said, there may be an actor where I know they have a daughter the same age as mine. So I may bring it up as a conversation point to, you gain a little common ground, and by talking to people that way and getting to know them on a personal level, I think it makes you a better collaborator.
Well, and and becomes a trust thing too. They start to trust you more than because they don't know who you are or whether you're going to favor them or help them or whatever. Let's talk about actors for a moment, because I think it's really important. You have clearly in your time worked with plenty of people who are not celebrities or famous, and you've worked with any number of serious celebrities, including Oscar winners. Is there a difference in the way that you address, approach, treat, act with folks who are famous, like a Samuel L. Jackson or a Peter Fonda or whoever, than you would with someone who's not famous? Or do you treat them all the same?
I don't think it's about fame. It's about experience.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yes, I treat people are people. I would treat them the same. Absolutely. But actors that have more experience, that know how to hit marks, that can, do the same thing over and over again, that know when you're going to tilt down to the cigarette in their hand, that they need to, in the back of their face, that they're going to wait a beat to say their line. I treat them differently only because there's less that I have to do to interact with them, and they just do their job, and they're so good. I mean, you work with Samuel Jackson, he doesn't miss a line. He doesn't do something different. I mean, he in Last Full Measure, there's a scene out by River. He's smoking a cigarette, and he literally does it the same way every single time, and that takes a lot of experience. Samuel Jackson's that way. David Duchovny, because he was a TV actor, is that way. So I just say that my experience with them is a little different because, the camera operator can work with them, or if I'm camera operating, I work with them, but I don't have to really jump in and tell them a whole lot.
Mm-hmm.
They know what to do. If you're working with an actor that's less experienced, you have to do a little more to tell them, hey, I'm about to tilt down to here. I'm going to grab this and I'm going to come back up. You need to do this. You need to stop here. But with those other pros, it's like after you've rehearsed it just seems to kind of flow most of the time. They do. I mean, for the most part.
And so do you find that that's true for experienced, not famous actors, people who are just regular working stiffs that do a lot of movies and TV, that they are the same way?
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about experience, not about how famous you are. Now, I mean, there are situations where you meet somebody and you're just like, you're a little bit starstruck. I mean, I got to say, all the actors on The Last Full Measure, I think Bradley Whitford may be the most struck because I love West Wing, and we were doing some walk and talks, like Pentagon walk and talks, and he's the king of them. And I'm like, we're saying, hey, we're going to go here, and then we're going to do this, and it's like, you just let him do it, but you kind of don't even want to tell him what to do. Anyway, he's the king of it. So not only because he's a great actor, I love his movies. I loved West Wing, and he just was one of those that, I mean, he's a great guy, and it's not like I was, it's just one of those things. But with him, I was a little more starstruck, so that was fun.
Because of the West Wing. That's very interesting.
Yeah.
He's clearly one of the great actors of our day, but he's not won an Oscar, and you've worked with Oscar winners. So that's
yeah, whatever. Yeah, I mean, but also, working with Christopher Plummer and those guys. I mean, he's an Oscar winner. That's just unbelievable. A guy of his, stature, of somebody of his age. I mean, he's unbelievable.
Well, he's been at it for more than 60 years.
Oh yeah, and it's such a privilege. I mean, it's whatever actor you work with, it's great. But there are certain ones, and professional actors with experience do this too, but oftentimes it's the younger ones or the ones with less experience who are missing their lines and causing problems that way. So, I respect anybody who can come to set, no matter how many pages you're shooting, remember all the lines and basically, block out a scene and hit the marks every time. I mean, it just takes so much time and experience to be able to do those things. It's a pleasure.
So depending upon the size of the production, does that create whatever pro issues that you have? Does it take you longer in a bigger production, or is it pretty much the same on every production?
I mean, I think it's kind of the same. I mean, the factors aren't actors to me. The factors are, the location and the type of shots you're doing.
Because you're going to take similar equipment no matter what you're shooting, right?
Well, not necessarily. I mean, there's certain movies where maybe you're doing a lot of steady cam shots that are more oneers, and I may have one camera. There's other ones where I may, Last Full Measure was always shot with 2 cameras. Vietnam portions were shot with 5 to 6 cameras. So there's definitely different equipment, different things I'm gonna do, but it really is about the material and the location and time. Time is everything.
How much does it change the way you approach things when you have multiple cameras versus a single camera?
Well, I mean, your lighting is going to change a little bit. I mean, these days, I feel like, as opposed to, way back when, before I was shooting, or even when I was starting, where you didn't have access. Basically, when I started, it was like, being way back when, where they had, 20 lights in the ceiling like TV does now, and shooting down and pinpointing where people are. When I started, it was that way because I didn't have any big lights. But now that I have access to bigger lights, I tend to try to light rooms, not people.
That's a big thing, to light a room versus people. What does it mean when you're going to light a person? You're going to focus on that person, and you're just going to light for them, correct?
Yeah. I mean, okay. So going back to what we're saying, it's like, actors hitting marks and things like that. It's like, you can light a person, you can light where they are. But my philosophy now is to light rooms. I try to put lights outside. I try to be as minimally invasive inside, which I think often, cuts down on turnaround time, allows you to move quicker, and often looks better.
So when you do that, are you able to then just shoot and not worry about resetting lights?
Okay. Yeah, a little bit. I mean, less lights. Yeah, you may have to move that light outside, a bigger light. But if the director decides that the person's going to go from the couch to standing by the window, it's not like you're moving a light to relight their key light. You're just maybe adjusting a big light outside the window.
Mm-hmm.
So that actually goes back to, multiple cameras. When I'm shooting with multiple cameras, I definitely try to light the room as much as possible, because I know I'm going to have to get 2 cameras in there as opposed to 1. And, if there's a, small specific light, for instance, that's lighting somebody, it may not be great for both cameras, but generally if I'm lighting a room or have a bigger light coming through, then, it can look better from, the angle you really want, and then the off angle that you kind of have to get.
What's your favorite thing about being in production? What do you love about it?
I mean, my favorite thing is shooting. I mean, I just definitely love it. I do love pre-production, but I love being on set. I love when the camera rolls. I love to, just roll with the punches and try to get what we planned, and, get what just spontaneously comes about and, you know, changes on set. I mean, the thrill of that is really fun. And I love the lighting portion of it. I really do love, you know, as much as I like the camera and where to move it and where to put it, I really love to try to paint with light and figure out how that happens beforehand, but then when you're on set, really, you know, see it come to life.
Well, all the great cinematographers, it's about painting with light, all of them. It's not about the camera. It's not about the film stock. It's all about the light. Roger Deakins, oh my goodness, the light that guy comes up with is just crazy, amazing.
It's amazing, yeah.
So can you think of the biggest disaster or the biggest challenge you've ever been involved in and how you solved it?
Well, I mean, in general, I think that The Last Full Measure, trying to shoot the Vietnam sequences, is probably one of the biggest challenges I've had. I mean,
it's huge.
We ended up going to Thailand. We had 3 weeks of prep, and then we shot everything in a week. We shot with, you know, 3 main cameras and then 2 or 3 either crash cams or drone cameras. And then at some points I had 3 or 4 cameras on the ground, and then a camera in a helicopter handheld, another one above the helicopter on another helicopter. And, you know, it was a lot to do. And it was very challenging too, because we're working in a foreign country. We were trying to work with military helicopters that their military wasn't really happy to give our aerial coordinator and our pilots any control over. So that whole experience was pretty challenging. I mean, the way we solved it was trying to we prepped as much as possible, built overhead plots for everything, planned everything out, knew exactly where the cameras were going to go, and just used as many cameras as possible to really capture it. And then also, you know, the big thing about it is that the whole movie, The Last Full Measure, most of the stuff that takes place in 1999, which is the closer to present day, is done with dollies and Steadicam, and it's very fluid. And, you know, when it got to the Vietnam, I actually wanted it to be very different, and handheld was the best way to solve it, doing it in 6 days. So I actually ended up using one Steadicam because the Steadicam operator there was amazing, and he could just move around like it was handheld, but then everything else really was handheld for those sequences. So, you know, that helped us get it in that amount of time. And the other big thing that I did was I got lucky, to be honest. It was overcast almost that whole time. So I could shoot from any angle and it would look great. And I, you know, I had some condors, some big cranes with big lights on them, and I would use them just to put up behind the trees and give me just a little bit of an edge, just to kind of give it, you know, a little backlight, a little separation. But for the most part, after that, I didn't do anything. I didn't use bounce cards. I mean, when I got close, I may augment with it, but I really just tried to shoot as much as possible. And that was the best way to solve it, because you know, you want perfect lighting, but in that situation, it can be gritty. And if you don't get all the shots, you don't have a movie. So there's no point in having 50% of the shots that are beautifully lit or perfect.
Right. Well, you know, you solved that quite well, because that whole sequence, what Byron is talking about, for those of you that haven't seen the movie, and again, I do encourage you to see it because it's really powerful. But the stuff that's in the States that takes place many years after the Vietnam War, where the characters who were in the Vietnam War are now much older, that's more traditional looking, in the sense that the camera's not got a shakiness to it. It doesn't look documentary style. But the stuff in Vietnam looks like it's documentary style, like you're hand holding everything. And so that it has a different energy to it. And that's what you're talking about, correct?
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, that energy, well, that's the energy we were trying to go for on Lucky, is that it was an unsteady, unstable. We had a character who was completely out of his mind. And my whole goal was to make the film feel like, or the shoot feel like, we were not on steady ground at all times, and we weren't. And that's what the movie feels like. It feels off kilter. And that's what you got in the Vietnam sequence, was off kilter. And I think that makes it so much more interesting when you have that dichotomy in the movie itself, because one part of the movie looks one way and the other part of the movie looks totally different.
But what's interesting is it doesn't always work out that way. This happened to work out where, because, like you said, we're on unsteady ground, because these are flashbacks, these are fragments of people's memories of chaos, that the handheld worked. If we had wanted to shoot that part more traditionally and use dollies and cranes and things like that, we wouldn't have had time to do it all. So, it was part fortuitous, part luck, whatever you want to call it, that the creative matched what the time we had. So that was, it's not always that way. Sometimes you're forced to go, okay, well, I don't have the time, but I need to do it this way because the movie feels like it needs to. And then you've got to make some really big decisions on how you're going to photograph it and what you're going to be able to get in that amount of time and what you're going to give up.
Sure. All right. So virtually all filmmaking comes filled with pressure. You've never worked on a production that had no pressure on it, have you?
No, I mean,
No.
There's always some sort of pressure.
It's always pressure. And sometimes the pressure is really difficult. It's a lot of pressure. So what is your trick or technique, or what do you do to deal with pressure? How do you deal with pressure?
I mean, I just try to go with my experience, and I try to just take one step at a time, and just take, you just take one problem, one issue at a time, and you try to hire the best people to help you and to be your crew people, your keys that are going to help you navigate through it. And I think the important thing is, once you get experience, you realize that, when I started out, I'd be nervous. And yes, I still get nervous sometimes. It's like, playing in a professional baseball game or football game. But really, when it comes down to it, as you get more experience, it's not about nerves. It's just, you just get anxious. You want to get this, and then you want to move on to the next thing. So you have to balance, how anxious you are. You can be anxious, but you just have to settle yourself down and just say, okay, I'm going to get this done, and then this done, and then this done. If you can try to get ahead and do it, but if you try to do everything at once, it's all going to be a disaster. So
yeah, you can't. You can't do it all at once. Nobody can.
Yeah, and the other thing too is it's so hard because you have to be conscious of money. You have to be conscious of time and all those things. But sometimes you just have to say, I'm here. We have to get it. And it doesn't matter if we're going to go into overtime, all that kind of stuff. It doesn't matter if they pull the plug. I just have to get this right now. Let that other problem be 10 minutes from now. And oftentimes it's solved by a producer, it's solved by the director, it's solved by the AD, it's solved by somebody. It doesn't have to be solved by you. You just have to, my job is to stay the course and be conscious of all that, but just not let it affect what you're doing at the moment, so that you end up with the best possible product all the way around. Otherwise, you just end up with a hodgepodge, and it's no good.
So I'm going to ask you a question I ask lots of guests that is not necessarily the easiest question to answer. What for you, when you're looking at whether you're going to work on a show or not, and it's not a money situation for you, perhaps, where you're looking at a quality of a product, what for you makes a script good? What attracts you to a script? Why do you want to do this one but not that one? What makes a story good for you?
Well, I think it has to go to has to go along with my sensibilities, which really are, to me, mostly about, the look and lighting. Like, I want to do things that I know that I can make interesting from a lighting standpoint. I think any movie you can make it interesting from a camera standpoint, but it really has to speak to me from a lighting standpoint. So, when I read the script, I try to put that stuff out of my head the first time, but I really can't help it. So I think about the camera and the lighting, but I really try to make sure it's something that I would want to light, that I know that in the end is going to look really good. On top of that, of course, I don't want to make bad movies. I want a script that's good. I want a script that speaks to me on other levels. But really, I mean, it comes down to, if I'm going to have fun, I'm going to enjoy it. I want it to be something that, I can light, and I can hopefully experiment on, and I can also try something new, maybe that I haven't done before.
Well, the camera and the picture that we're getting is a major part of how the story is told. So you are a major component in the storytelling. And therefore, when you look at a script, you must be somehow envisioning the way things will be. Yes?
Yeah. And yes, absolutely. That's a big thing for me. And I have to be invested in how that is going to be told. And, I think if a director said to me, I read a script and I envisioned it one way, and they said, I really would like this to be all static shots that never move, it would have to really be interesting to me and speak to me on some other level, whether it's a lighting level, or it really has to work for the story. Because I want to move the camera if it's appropriate, and I want to light it cool if it's appropriate, or I want to light it appropriately. I want to do everything like that. So, but yes,
I can tell you from my own personal experience that you like to move the camera, which is a fine thing.
I do.
Let's
I
talk.
think it's important. It
Let's
doesn't
chat.
mean I wouldn't shoot a movie that's static. I mean, it just would have to be the right movie. Anyway.
Well, again, you would have to feel as if that's the way that the story should be told from a pictorial standpoint.
Yeah, exactly. And it's often just intuition too. It's like sometimes you don't even know why you want to do a movie. Other times you just, you know exactly the reason you want to do it. And then other times you don't want to do a movie because it's too close to another movie you've done, or it's just not something different.
All right. So I want to just chat. Don't want to let it go too far where we don't chat for a little bit about Lucky, because that's our shared experience.
Of course.
Have you worked on many movies that was that fast?
I mean, I did at that time. I don't anymore, but at that time I had done a bunch of, smaller independent movies that shot in 9, 10, 12 days. But that was the first movie that, I think we were kind of I feel like a little ahead of our time, because we didn't have all these movie lights, because we had practical locations, because we had low ceilings, like in the downstairs area. We lit a lot of that movie with practicals and lights in the frame and non-movie lights.
You may recall that when we got it back into the post facility, that it looked like video. I mean, it looked like TV, and we had to go to Film Look and crush the heck out of the blacks so that it really got very grainy. And the result of that is, which is kind of makes me a little unhappy, is that years later, as the quality of TV and computer monitors have gotten better, that film grain now makes it too dark to watch. It's really hard to watch it because it's really dark.
Well, but I mean, the other thing too is, if I remember correctly, I think that was like an interlaced camera, and so that made it look more video-y. And then to try to knock it down to 24 and do all that, there was just so much that had to be done.
But that's now all gone with the Alexa and the Red and those kinds of cameras.
Yeah. Well, now they're like, they're film cameras. They look like film. They feel like film, or whatever. I shouldn't say they look like film or feel like film. That's not really true. They look like cinema. Yeah, but they look like cinema. It's that they're cinematic cameras, as opposed to, you don't want something to look like a soap opera. You want it to look like cinema. And funny enough, cinema now looks different than cinema looked before. I feel like, I used to watch movies and you didn't even think about film grain, as kind of to your point. But now I'll watch digital movies and they're so clean. And then you watch a movie that's shot on film, and sometimes you can't tell the difference. Other times you're like, oh, you're in the theater, you see the scratches, you see the film, and it's kind of like, oh, I'm so used to the clean, it takes me out of it.
Well, one of the tricks to remind of Lucky, one of the reasons why we were able to shoot that much footage that fast was because there was no scene with more than 2 characters in it. Occasionally, very rarely, we had two characters and a very well-trained dog. But we never had any scenes with more than 2 characters in it. We shot really essentially in one location for 9 days. And that way we could shoot, and you set up all your...
Yeah, I was going to say, it was pre-lit. Yeah, I mean, everything was ready with mostly practicals. And like there was 1 or 2, couple movie lights here or there to create like hard shadows, but there really wasn't that many of them, because A, we couldn't hide them, and B, we didn't have the money to use them all.
In the house, you had a high enough ceiling in the main part of the house where you actually put some movie lights up there and you turn them on and off as you wanted them.
Yeah.
And they were pre-lit. And the exterior, we shot everything at night. There was almost nothing in the day. I think there was 1 scene in the day.
And we had 1 bigger HMI or something out there that's still plugged into a wall, like a 1200, that would give us some moonlight.
Correct. And so it was... The key was everything was done simple. There was nothing. There was no track, right? So you never had to lay track.
Nope. And the handheld helped. Yeah.
It was all handheld. So I'm saying these are the tricks and the secrets of how we were able to shoot a feature-length movie in 9 days, which would be really hard to do under any circumstance.
Well, and back to what you said before, it's about preparation too. If we hadn't prepared, we never would have been able to do it. No. It wouldn't be, well, especially with a dog. I mean, it never would have happened.
Well, so everyone knows, in that 9.5 days, 9.5 12-hour days, never exceeding 12 hours, we had a highly well-trained dog that was in 5 of the 9 days. And it was all about the dog, because the movie's about the dog. And so if we didn't have this extremely well-trained dog, I think we would have never made it.
all those factors contributed. Like you said, it's the preparation, it's the dog, it's the actor, it's the location, it's the handheld. I mean, everything you mentioned is exactly why we were able to do it. If you're going to try to make a small movie with very little money and very little time, you better set yourself up to succeed in a number of ways. It's not just one thing that's going to lead you there. It's a puzzle of different elements that gets you to success, in my opinion.
So meanwhile, we set out to make a black comedy, Byron, and that's what we were trying to make, was a black comedy. And no one would touch us at any of the film festivals. And we found out that we were actually a horror movie. We didn't set out to make a horror movie, but we became a horror movie after the fact. And those were the festivals that we got into, and those are the ones that we won, and we won a bunch of them.
That's great. It found its audience.
It found its audience, and we had to find that niche. Well, all right, we've been talking for a little more than an hour, believe it or not, and so we're going to slowly wind this thing down. I'm wondering, in all your years of experience and all the things you've done, whether it was lucky or something else, doesn't matter. Do you have a story or two that you can share with us that is quirky, weird, offbeat, oddball, or maybe just plain funny?
Yeah, I mean, I probably have a few of them, but one of them that I think is kind of fun is I did a video with Snoop Dogg.
Mm-hmm.
It was Snoop Dogg, Pharrell, and Stevie Wonder, called California Roll, and we had this setup where we had like 4 or 5 different sets. We had a lot to shoot. I think we pre-lit and then we shot it all in one day. And we had a point where we had to shoot Snoop and Pharrell, and they were on this big pyramid. Like it was built up off the ground, and it was like a gold reflective pyramid. So we shot the 2 of those guys. We had a techno crane. We were shooting. It was great. And then the director said, "Okay, well, let's just do one more take." And with just Snoop. And so Snoop goes out there, and we're in a pretty big sound stage. I mean, it's a giant sound stage, and the ceilings are 30 feet tall or whatever. And he lights up, what he likes to smoke. And we shoot this whole take, and he smokes the whole thing.
Oh.
And I can tell you, I don't usually smoke, and I had a contact high after it. And we had like one more big scene to do where Snoop was sitting in a car on blue screen, and at some point his people came up and just said, "Snoop's done," and I was like, "Wow, if Snoop can be done after that," and it was, I was like, "Wow, I'm witnessing something pretty interesting." I don't know how often you see him do something like that. So I thought that was kind of a funny thing that happened.
It probably takes a lot to get Snoop done.
Yeah, exactly. And so I thought that was one of the funniest things ever. I mean, he was great to work with, and it was a great video. But that always sticks in my mind. So yeah, well, and then go ahead.
Do you have another one? Did you have a second story?
I mean, when I first started out, I pretty much did interviews. I mean, that's how I would make my money. I would shoot short films, and I would try to shoot independent feature films. But the only way I would make money, because some of those I made like $50 a day, or it was like gas money, and it was hard to make a living. I was living off credit cards. But I used to shoot interviews, and I used to shoot a lot for Fox and ESPN and sports stuff. But then I also had a client where I do like these celebrity interviews, and I remember going to shoot a celebrity interview of Will Smith, and I went to his house, and we were setting up, and he comes out, and he's got like people around, like,
Sure.
And he comes out with this towel over his arm and like a basket of muffins. And he was like, "Would you like a muffin?" I was like, "Sure." And then he's like, "Would you like something to drink?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm okay." He's like, "Oh, I have water, I have Gatorade, I have Coke, I've got anything you want, whatever you want." And that just always stuck in my mind that Will Smith, at that time, this was 15 years ago, whatever, Independence Day, whatever it was probably one of the biggest stars on the planet. And he just threw, a towel over his arm and grabbed a thing of muffins that somebody must have made and offered it to us. I just thought that's just such a neat story. He's such a nice guy that just stuck in my head.
Well, you can say you were served by Will Smith. I mean, that's pretty cool.
It was cool. I just thought it was really neat.
All right, last question. Do you have a solid piece of advice or a tip for those who are just starting out, to try and break into the industry, or maybe somebody who's in a little bit and trying to get to the next level?
Well, yes. The thing that I always say is shoot. Pick up a camera, write something. If you're just a DP or you want to be a DP, find somebody who writes, find somebody who has a story. if you want to shoot commercials, shoot a spec commercial. If you want to shoot music videos, find a small band and shoot a video for them. These days you can get the cameras, everything's cheap. You can borrow a camera. You could do things without lighting outside, or you can go to Home Depot and get some of those little metal clip-on lights and put a light bulb in it and light things. You can get a fluorescent light. Just shoot, and just, you got to just keep doing it, because as we talked about before, the only way to get the experience, the only way to be able to be on a set and make a change or pivot is to just do it. So I just say shoot, and find people that want to shoot. If you're a DP or you want to be a DP and you're just out of school, go get a job as a PA on set, and you're going to work with other PAs, and one of them's bound to want to be a director, and team up with them. Just find people that you can collaborate with, and find, if you went to film school, find people that you went to film school with, that you get along with and that are good collaborators. So, it's just shoot.
You're saying there is no substitute for just doing it.
There is no substitute for. You can read about it. It's like because of COVID, I haven't been working, and I'm funny enough, I'm right near you in Pennsylvania. I'm in Western Pennsylvania, Erie, and there's not a lot of people around here, and I've been golfing a lot. And then I just started like videotaping myself and like looking at it, like looking at stuff online. It's just like golf, that you're not going to hit well if you're just reading about it. And you got to go out and you got to do it. You just got to keep swinging the ball. So filmmaking is the same way. You won't get better. You can read American Cinematographer. You can watch YouTube videos till you're blue in the face. That's all great stuff, but it has to be just supplements of actually doing it.
Well, that is extremely valuable advice, because nobody gets anywhere in the arts without doing the art. So that's extremely wise advice that you're giving it. Byron, this has been just a fantastic interview, and I've just enjoyed the heck out of it.
Me too.
And seeing you again, which you haven't seen each other for a while. And I wish you all the great things that are still coming your way. I know that we're in the middle of this awful pandemic, but you're going to get back to work at some point in the future here. And I look forward to seeing all of the work that's yet to come. And so I thank you just greatly for coming on the show today. It's been a real treat.
Thank you for having me. I enjoyed talking about the film industry and also reminiscing about our shared experience.
Well, that's for sure. And we did have one, that's for sure. And maybe we'll have one again in the future. Wouldn't that be cool?
Absolutely. I'm ready.
Well, all right, we'll set it up. We'll get going. Thanks again, Byron. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
And so we've come to the end of today's Story Beat. If you like this podcast, please take a moment to give us a rating or review on whatever app or platform you're listening to. Your support helps us bring more great Story Beat episodes to you. Until next time, I'm Steve Cuden, and may all your stories be unforgettable.